Yeah. Let me just double check that it's recording. Okay, yeah, it's recording. Cool. All right. Welcome again, everyone, to our first Kati course of winter quarter. Woo! Hopefully in the future they'll be in person, but as of now they'll be online. But I'm glad a lot of you are able to come, even though it's online. So for this first Kati course of the quarter, the topic, as you can see, is how to get better grades. And so for those of you that don't know me, but I think I know everyone here. I'm Brandon. I'm the academics chairperson. And so I just want to start off with like a quick question, and you can use the chat or like the raise hand button. But who here has room for improvement for your grades from last quarter? Who here has room for improvement for your grades from last quarter? Nice, a lot of hands. Cool. And I'm sure that's all of us, right? Unless you're just, getting perfect grades left and right. But for most of us, we always have room for improvement from last quarter. And so that's why I think it's important to talk about how we can learn from that and get our better grades. Yeah, cool. Thank you, everyone. I love the interaction. All right, we'll go to the next one here. So yeah, this is just a little bit more about me. For those of you that don't know, I'm a fourth year. I'm a pre-med, and I feel like I've been successful in my classes at UCR in the last 4 years. So hopefully I can share my advice and my experience with getting good grades with y'all. All right. And so throughout the Kati course, if you have any questions or anything, at any time, feel free to raise your hand or send a message in the chat, and we could answer it when we get the time. The GPA. Yeah, I just want y'all to like see that it's not like a flex or anything. It's just to show you that these strategies that I'm going to talk about really do work. I'm not just like saying it just to like sound like I know what I'm talking about. I really do believe in the power of these strategies. So hopefully that's y'all are able to incorporate this into your own study routines. All right, let other people in. All righty, cool. So if you have questions at any time, feel free to send them in the chat or raise your hand or anything like that, and we could answer it during the Kati course. But there will also be time at the end if you want to save your questions for the end. All right, cool. And then so this is just a little bit of what we'll talk about today. So this is just like a little rundown. So first, we're just gonna have like a little intro into how studying and how learning is important, right? And then we're gonna talk a little bit about the mindset behind improving our grades from last quarter and how that's important. And then obviously we're going to talk about note-taking in lecture and some strategies I have for taking good notes. And then lastly, of course, we have the effective study techniques for actually getting these good grades. All right. All right, so here's a little intro. So just a disclaimer here. So hopefully, I know a lot of you here said that you do have improvement in your grades from last quarter, but if you feel that your study strategies are getting you the results that you want, definitely stick with that. I don't want to, everyone studies in their own way, and I don't want to like corrupt your study strategy. So if it's working for you and you feel like they're getting you the results that you want, then stick with that. But if they aren't, definitely try to incorporate these strategies into your own routine, and we'll talk about those in a second. All right, and I wanted to remind everyone again that, our grades don't define us and they don't reflect our potential to succeed. So if you had a rough quarter last quarter or in the past, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad student or anything like that. There's always going to be a possibility to improve. All right. Cool. And so for the first point here, we're going to talk about the mindset. And honestly, I think this is probably the most overlooked part for improving grades, because I think a lot of people don't put in enough time like reflecting on how last quarter went and how they could have done better. So I think this is actually a really, really important part. All right, and so And so don't be afraid by this comments, but this is like a big mindset thing for me, is that it's always your fault, right? And so I just put a meme here: hard to swallow pills, it's always your fault, right? And it is a hard thing to think about, right? It's a hard thing to say to yourself, like, it's my fault, it's my fault. But let me move into the next slide. But it really is, it's not to make you feel bad or to make ourselves feel bad. It's to remind us that even though there are some things that even though there are some things that we couldn't control, obviously, right, there are definitely things that we could have controlled. And so I think it's putting the power back in our hands and saying, okay, I could have done this, and that's what maybe why I didn't do as well as I wanted to. And so if we're ever looking for improvement in anything, the only way to really do that is to be introspective and focus on what you can improve on. All right. So the reason why I have a GIF of Kobe up there is, like, to get to that point, right, to winning that championship, Kobe never blamed his failures on anyone but himself. He never said, oh, it's my teammates' fault that I am not winning a ring, right? He always looked at himself. He would analyze his own games and to see his mistakes, and he would go to the gym every day to work on himself. And so I think that's what sets him apart from a lot of people. And that's kind of the mentality that you want to have. You want to look at yourself and see what you can do differently. Exactly. Mamba mentality. All right. And so when you're reflecting, right, you really want to focus on the factors that you can control, right? Because obviously there's things that you couldn't control. So really just focus on what you could have controlled. So why did it happen? Why did you get these grades, and how did it happen? What were you doing that led you to getting these grades? And I think something for me was that in my first year, something that I would always say was, it's my professor's fault, right? I just had a bad professor, and that's why I couldn't get an A, because like no one could have gotten an A with that professor, right? No one could have gotten a B or a C or whatever. And so that's what I thought a lot of the time in my first year. But but over time, you really start to see, like, you're never going to improve that way by blaming other people. And so over time, it should evolve to, maybe it wasn't my professor's fault. Maybe I just needed to study this way for the class instead. And so I think that mindset switch was really big for me. And I think is really big for a lot of people. Oops. And so I just wanted to ask everyone here, what's like, and this is like obviously for yourself, so go ahead and like jot this down somewhere, but what's the smallest or easiest first step that you can make right now to change what you did in fall quarter? So this is really for yourself, so you can like write this down or type this down anywhere. But what's the smallest or easiest first step you can make right now to change what you did in fall quarter? So just go ahead and take a second to jot that down somewhere, because I really think that having that first step planned is like literally the first step to turning things around this quarter. And so I think one example for me was in my first year, I was taking like 4 classes a quarter, right? Just like normal. And I realized that, actually, how about this? By like show of hands or by the chat, who here has like ever taken an AP class in high school? Anyone ever taken an AP class? Yep. See, a lot of us have taken AP classes, right? And so when you take AP classes and you do well on the AP test, you get credit for college, right? And that gives you more flexibility with things. And so I learned that with my units, they allowed me to take only 3 classes per quarter. After maybe like a couple quarters of taking 4 classes, because I had those AP credits. And basically you want to take as little classes as possible per quarter if your units allow it, right? Because you'll be able to dedicate more time to each class, and then as a result, you'll get higher grades. So that's honestly like my secret on how I'm able to get a lot of high grades, because I'm only really dedicating time to 3 classes at a time. And so, but the way I did that though was by talking to my academic advisor, and they'll like literally walk you through and plan out all your units for the rest of the year. So that was really helpful for me. So that was just like a little bonus tip there. All right. And then so I just wanted to give like a different, or like just give like an example of kind of like a way that you can reflect, right? So this is kind of like what I call, like, I guess, the cycle of improvement. And this is Zac Efron reflecting, if no one remembers that from, was it High School Musical 2? Was it High School Musical 2? I think, yeah. But this is just an example, right, of how you can reflect on your own quarters. So let's say in fall quarter, this person got a D+ in comp sci, right, computer science. In the winter quarter, what's important is that you kind of think about, why did I get a D+? And you really want to think about that. And in this example, let's say the student's reason was that it was because of poor planning and deadline tracking. And so after you figure out what the problem was, you want to figure out, how can you solve that problem? And so let's say for this solution, it's to get help and make a calendar with due dates and plan study time. And then after that, then let's say the student gets a C+, right? It's like, it's not a huge jump, but it's a whole letter grade up, and any improvement is a good improvement. All right, and so let's say after they get the C+, right, they've improved. Now in spring quarter, now they want to see, okay, why did I get a C+? Why is it not like a B or something? And then maybe it comes down to what their study strategies were. And so let's say it was poor study strategies. Now they're going to get help from professors or TAs or other people that can help them choose an effective study strategy. And so the cycle will just keep continuing and continuing until you get to the goal, your goal grade, and your goals in anything really. All right, let's see. Are there any questions on kind of like the whole mindset aspect to getting better grades? Anything at all before we move on? Any questions at all on like the whole mindset or reflection or anything like that before we move on to the note taking? Feel free to raise hand or use the chat. Yes, Carla, go ahead.
One of the suggestions you had was reaching out to your academic advisors to like help you plan out your units and like basically your whole college life. But how, or like, do you have any advice for people who may be too scared to reach out to them, or maybe too scared to like, just reach out to any staff on campus?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think that's one of like the main reasons that people aren't reaching out to those people. It's not because they don't know they exist. It's because they're really scared of, what if they think I'm dumb, or what if they don't want to help me or something like that. But I just remember like going to, let's say, my first professor's office hours. Like I used to never go to office hours, but once I started going, I realized like they're a lot more laid back and relaxed than you would think. Because I used to think that they're just all really scary and they're just like the person grading our paper. So that gave them a lot of power, and like, I don't want to talk to someone like that. But when you like get to know them and you get to talk to them, they're really always there to help you. Like, especially at UCR, no one's there to like take you down. And so especially advisors and people like that, I think don't be afraid. I'd say just like take a first step, schedule an appointment and see how it goes. And if you don't like it, then you don't have to go anymore. But I would definitely say to try at least once, because it's definitely helped me a lot. Yeah, good question. Any other questions on like mindset or anything like that, or reflection? No. Alrighty. Cool. So now we're going into note taking during lecture. So I just want to ask everyone, and you can either unmute or type in the chat, but how do you take notes during lecture? And there's a lot of different ways to take notes. How do you take notes during lecture? All right, Chris and Albert say annotating slides. Nice. Anyone else have another method they use? I'm sure there's a lot of ones out there. Bullet point style, okay, kind of like an outline, I feel. Type them up, try my best. Oh, the chat. Try my best to reword what's being said. Yeah, that's like secretary vibes, Vince. Vince is fast typer, I couldn't. Okay, but kind of like paraphrasing, basically, that's good. Take notes before lecture and then pay more attention to what they're saying. Nice, that's really good. Write in a notebook with details what the professor says. Nice, nice. Cool. Yeah, so a lot, as you can see, like there's a lot of different ways to take notes, right? There's not just like one specific way that you have to take notes. But in this section, I'm going to show you like some examples of some methods and why they're effective. All right, and just give you also some tips on some tips that you can incorporate into your own note-taking style. All right, so here's just like a little bit of intro information and I guess like general tips. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of you, everyone here should be taking notes, but I just want to reemphasize again that you should be taking notes, right, during lecture, because not only, does it give you extra things to look at when you're reviewing, but it also keeps you engaged and less bored when you're watching the lecture. And so I think one of the things that people struggle with is knowing what to write down, because there's so many things to write down. And so I think some of the key things that you can jot down are important points. So let's say professor says this part's really important, then that's something I'll like highlight or write in red or something like that. You can write down any questions that you have. So like if you're confused about something, you could like circle something in a certain color and be like, what is this? Or you could look up, or you could write something like look it up later. That's also really helpful. And you can also write down questions they ask, right? Because if the professor is asking you a question during lecture, they'll probably ask it on the test. So that's definitely really helpful. Next point here is handwritten notes are best, right? And this is like backed by a bunch of research. I read a couple of research papers on that, and they find that handwritten is best. And the reason is that, so why do people, for those of you that type your notes, why do you type it rather than handwrite it? Any reasons? Why do you type it rather than handwriting it? Right, yeah, you can't keep up, right? It's a lot faster. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the main reason why people like typing it, because if you can keep up, right, then you can write more down and then you can look at more when you're reviewing. And so I think that's the main defense for doing typing. And so there's some ways to make typing a really good note-taking strategy, but for these research papers, the reason they found that handwritten is best is it's good because it's slow, right? It's good because it's slow. So imagine you're trying to write down everything the professor says. Because you're handwriting it, you're slower than the people that are typing. And because you're slower, you have to be more picky with what you write down, because it's going to take more time. So if you are handwriting, you have to be a lot pickier what you write down. So you're only going to be writing down the important points. And as you can see in the second bullet point, that'll keep you to the point. And it'll keep you to the point, and you'll already be thinking about, is this important enough to write down? Because sometimes I think when you're typing or even when you're writing, you end up typing things down, but then it might not even be like important for the slide, if that makes sense. So that's why they say that handwritten is best. But we're going to talk a little bit later what you can do with, I guess it's down here. We're going to talk like how you can make type notes still really effective. And then handwritten is best also so you stay focused during lecture, because when you type your notes, sometimes you'll end up typing your notes, and then once you finish typing, because you're so fast, you'll be done, right? And when you're done typing your notes, while the lecturer is talking, you'll just like sit there and just be like waiting until the next slide, and then you go back and then you copy things again. And so I think once you finish writing the notes, then there's like that period of relaxation, and then you can't really, and then you're not really as engaged because you're just waiting for the next part. So that's another reason. But if you do need to take type notes, or if you really prefer type notes, I recommend only typing in bullets. So try not to type in full sentences because that uses up more time. So if you type in bullets, you're still trying to keep things to the point. And so you're still trying to think in your head, is this important enough to write down? And so keep it short and sweet, and don't copy down the slide. So I think that's like one of the hard parts, because I think a lot of people are just trying to make sure I gotta get everything down. But if they like provide the slide on Canvas or iLearn, then you don't have to worry too much about that, because you could just look it up later and fill it in your notes. So yeah. And then this also gives you, when you keep it short and sweet, this gives you more time to focus on what they're actually saying rather than what's already on the slide. So that's like just a little intro to note taking. We got more. And so I know a lot of you said that you like annotating slides. I think it was Chris and Albert that said that, right? Yeah. And so this is my preferred method for note taking, right? And so I put in some examples here. So there are a couple ways to do this, right? So for me, I have an iPad. I'm lucky enough to have an iPad. So so what I do is I download the slides on my iPad and then I annotate it. So I don't know if you can really see this, but this is an example slide here from my notes. This is like, there's so much text here, like it's making me upset. But basically, especially when there's really dense slides like this, it's really important to kind of summarize it in your own words. So for example, purple is the color that I use if I have a question, right? So in this last bullet point, I was really confused. So I wrote a question down that I wanted to ask. And then for this red right here, that's kind of like my important color. I was like, what does it mean by patterns? And I kind of asked the question, and then that's where that came from. And then in blue, that's just my normal note-taking color. I just kind of summarized here, like these are just examples. We don't need to know it, right? So just things like that. Because imagine if you were trying to type all this down, like that would be a nightmare. So it's really helpful to annotate on the slides. So you're only focused on like what is important and what they're saying, rather than trying to copy everything down. But I know a lot of people aren't able to have an iPad, but what I did in high school and what I did in my first year before I got an iPad was I would print out the slides, and there's like a way that you can change the pages per sheet option to like 6 or whatever number you want, and it'll lay it out in like this way. And so you won't be using as much paper, right? Because you could do 6 per page and then you double side it, and that's already 12 slides on one piece of paper. So pretty good, pretty good. And then, so you just kind of did the same thing with that, except you're just annotating on paper. And like I said here, it's less focused on copying down the slide and more focused on the lecture and the key points. So that's like one method that you can do, is annotating slides. Next, this is like the outline method. This is probably another really, really popular method that people like to do. Who here, by show of hands or in the chat, who here uses the outline method or has ever used the outline method? And like the outline method is, it kind of looks a lot like this, right? You'll have like a main topic, and then you'll just have bullet points, and there's like different indentations. Nice, nice, a lot of people. Cool. And so it'll kind of have this structure where it'll have the main title and then indent for the next subtopic, and it'll just keep kind of indenting for each other subtopic that you go. And so this is really good because you can do this both on paper or on your iPad, or when you're typing the notes. So this is like applicable for any medium that you want to use. And so this is really good for classes where the notes are well structured. So like when your professors use numbers, like where it's like, okay, this is part 1, and then you can like write down all your stuff under that. And then when they say part 2, then you could start a new little chunk. So it's really good for those classes. And this is good because it follows a consistent format, right? So you'll see it's the same format over and over. You're only writing in bullet points, so it's still keeping it short and sweet and to the point. And it keeps your notes very organized and easy to review. So like if you're, let's say, if you're like reviewing and you're like, okay, I need to look for my notes on main topic 1, you know it's like right here because it's like the biggest branch that there is. So you do that. And when you're doing this, like I said before, it's really important to not copy the slide, especially if your professors provide what's the word? If they provide the slides to you like on iLearn or on Canvas, because you can always review that later and fill in missing information. But it'll be a lot more time consuming if you're gonna try to rewatch the recording and see what they said, if that makes sense. All right. And then, so those are like, let's see, yeah, those are like the 2 main methods that I went over. Obviously, there's a lot more note-taking methods, and you can look up other methods if you want, but those are the 2 that I thought I would talk about. All right, and so now here are some actual tips on how to write better lecture notes. So no matter what note-taking method you use, you'll be able to use all of these strategies. All right, so this is a good part. So I actually learned this in an education class that I was taking here at UCR. It was, the class was literally about learning, so it was pretty cool. And so this first tip was that you should use a full-size notebook or a screen. So so let's say you're taking notes like on paper. If you have like a notebook that maybe the page isn't as big, you're going to be turning it more often, right? And each time you turn the page, that'll be a little distraction, and that'll put a little break in your memory. So it's best to use like a full-size notebook that's like a full paper size rather than a small one. And then the same idea applies when you're using a digital note-taking thing. So like if you're annotating on your iPad, don't have the other tabs open. And then if you're typing your notes, try to have it like take up as much of the screen as possible. So like half your screen will be the notes, and then half your screen will be the Zoom lecture. But if you have like other things available to you, then it'll be really hard to focus. Right, and so that's like the first point. Yeah, Education 10. Yeah, that's a really good class. If anyone has like a 3-4 units to burn, then that's like a really good class. Next point is to leave empty space. So when you're taking notes, sometimes you like really pack things into your notes, and then there's no open space to like add anything important in. But I think it's really important to leave a little bit of empty space so that in case something does come up, then you can annotate or fill it in later. All right, and then the next one is to compare notes. And so I think it's really good now because there's a lot of Discord servers for classes. Does anyone have Discord servers for the classes? I know I have like, there's like one available for like all classes. Yeah, I see head nods. Yeah, so I think it's really good now because of Discord. And I think a lot of people in my Discords, at least, they've been like sharing lecture notes. They might not be like sending entire files, but you could ask people like, oh, what did you get? What did you write down for this slide? And then sometimes they'll like just send it or something like that, just so you can get an idea of if you missed something or not that someone else caught. So I think it's really helpful. And obviously you can also, if you have a friend in your class, if you're lucky enough to have a friend in your class, then you can like text them and be like, oh, what did I miss? I know I've done that a couple times this quarter already. So so those are definitely helpful ways to compare your notes to make sure that you're getting all the information down. This is also, these last two are also really good. Just kind of like design and like shortcuts. Definitely use symbols. So like I never write the word like increasing on my page, right? I just draw an up arrow. It's a lot faster that way. Or I never write the words like leads to. So like if I say, let's say A leads to B, I don't even write those words. I just put A, sideways arrow, B, right? So just little things like that, it saves you a lot of time. And as long as you can understand it, then it doesn't matter to anyone else, right? No, like you don't have to make them look pretty for other people. As long as you can understand like your symbol language, then it's all good. I also like to use stars. Like when I'm taking my lecture notes, I'll put like a red star next to something the professor says is going to be on the test. And then also it's really helpful to color code your notes. And so I think it's really easy to go overboard with your colors. I see like there's notes with like every like color of the rainbow and more, but I think the sweet spot for colors is about 3, because when you go like above 5, then like sometimes you'll just forget like what even the color was meant to mean. So I think keeping it around like 3 to 5 colors is really good. What colors do I recommend? I think like, well, definitely I don't consider black a color. So black could be like your normal note-taking color. For me personally, there's black, and then red is like my really important, it's like my really important color. So like if they say this is going to be on the test, that's going in red, right? And then purple, like you saw earlier, that's my, what's it called? That's my like questions color. And then blue is like, it's like my side notes color. But yeah, it's honestly up to your preference and what makes sense in your brain. Yeah. And then something also is that it helps me, like, for example, let's go back here. For example, here, like in this slide on the left here, it's like, this is like insane. Like, I don't even know what this means, but it's really important to have a take-home message for each slide. So like when there's complicated slides like this, just having like one sentence, like, or one bullet summary to summarize what this whole slide means is really helpful. So yeah. All right. Are there any questions on lecture notes or taking lecture notes or any tips like that before we move on to the actual study strategies? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Any questions on like lecture notes, or if you have any questions about like how you can improve your notes or anything like that? Ooh, that's actually a good question. Someone asked, would highlighters count as colors? I think that like for pen colors, honestly, I'd say like 3 colors is good for that. And then like for highlighters, you could have like another 3 colors, but like I wouldn't have like 6 pen colors and like 6 highlighter colors. That'll probably be a little much, but probably like 3 colors is like the sweet spot for like each type of utensil, if that makes sense. Yeah. So sometimes for like vocab, I'll highlight it in green, and then like just regular important information, it'll just be like in yellow, for example. Yeah, good question. Any other questions on note taking? Anything? All right. Cool. And then so lastly, we're going to go over the effective study techniques. So how do all of you currently study right now? I think this is like the big question. How do you all currently study right now? Like, are you like a rereader, a rewriter, a flashcarder, practice questions? How do you all study? Yeah, or like rewatch lectures maybe. Ooh, Quizlet, teach others, nice. Review notes, watch lectures. Compile notes, nice. Like putting all the notes together from everywhere that you learned it, that's pretty good. Very organized. All right, cool. Yeah, so those are actually all really good study tips already, and you'll see that we'll talk about some of those actually. So, but before we do that, I just want to kind of give you like an overview of what learning is. All right, and so I think, yeah, I'll talk about this first. But basically, the idea is that learning is 2 steps, right? Learning is 2 steps. A lot of people think that it's just putting the information in your brain and that's learning. But learning is 2 steps, because this first step is putting it into your brain, right? And then the second step is applying it out of your brain. So doing things like practice problems, because when the test comes, that'll require that second step of learning. But I think a lot of people put too much focus on this first step of learning. They'll do all these reviewing notes. They'll just reread and rewatch, but they won't ever practice like practice questions or sample tests or do Quizlets or anything like that. And so I just wanted to emphasize that there are 2 steps in learning. All right. So as for reviewing notes, right? So now you have your notes, right? You got them from lecture. I think a really common and a really probably the most common note reviewing strategy that they found in studies is that people like to reread notes, and that was their favorite because it was like a lot easier, right, than other things. The only issue with that is that it's passive, right? And when you're just not really engaging with it, then it's not going to go into your head as well, and you're going to have poorer recall than normal. So the better way to do it is to do an active review of your notes. So doing things like, instead of just rereading it in your head, you can go from top to bottom and like recite it. So you're going to start at the top, you're going to start talking about it, and then you're going to say the bullet points below it as well. And kind of almost like you're teaching it, right? Like Kristen Albert said. So that's like the reciting aspect to that. And you can also rewrite your notes, right? So things like summarizing it or condensing it are helpful. And then editing your notes too. That's why we leave the blank space there if you need it. And so those are all active forms of reviewing notes. And so that'll lead to better recall. Oops. And then so for your tips here, here's some tips for active note reviewing. You can update it in your own words. So if you wrote something down that like the professor said, but you have no idea what it even means, then you have to update it in your own words so that you can understand it, right? And that'll help it stick in your head because it's words that you came up with, not words that someone else said to you. And then the next part is to answer any questions your professor asked. So let's say you wrote in your notes that your professor asked you, like, what's 1 + 1? Then maybe in your notes, you could put the right answer to that, just so that you know in case it comes up on a test. And then like the next part, like I said before, is rewrite your notes, but don't just rewrite it the same way. You want to summarize it, pick the important points, and then condense it in your own words. Oh yeah, you do a poll everywhere. Yeah, that's a really good idea because I actually haven't had a poll everywhere in a while, but if your professors use practice questions like that, then those are definitely ones that you should keep track of. All right, and so some ways that I like to summarize or condense is by making summary sheets and mind maps, which we'll see in a second. And then you can also fix your organization. So if your notes were really messy, you can kind of like move things around and rewrite them that way. And so another thing that actually a lot of people don't know is that you should review, it's best to review your notes within 24 hours of taking or making them. So let's say, let's see, what's today? Today's Friday. Let's say I had a lecture yesterday. Let's say I had a lecture like 5 p.m. yesterday, and I finished my notes at 6. Until like Friday, right now at 6 p.m., I should have like reviewed the notes already and done whatever it is here that I needed to do. So that's really important because after that, then you're gonna kind of forget what you've been talking about in your lecture notes. All right. And then so I'm gonna go show you some examples of mine. So here are just some examples of ways that you can condense information and summarize your notes. So right here, you'll see on the left, this is like kind of like a mind map that you can make. This one's the one that I'm making right now for one of my classes. So this one is on immunology. So it's like the central topic, and then it just kind of branches off from there. And then it branches off into the smaller topics. So that's like one way. Yeah. And then the one on the right, this is a summary sheet that was made for biochem. And so there's like a lot of different ways that you can condense information into a way that makes sense for you. These need to be archived in a museum. Thanks. Yeah, so like the thing is, like, you don't have to spend as much time doing something like this, but if it helps you, like if it helps you memorize like the structure of things, or if it helps you memorize it just by making it, then it's worth it, right? I got a really good question. Yeah, so it's basically like an aesthetic outline. So because if you imagine it, right, immunology, that's like the topic of the entire lecture. And then let's say these boxed topics, these are like the main topics, right? So that's like the furthest to the left indented one. And then each branch after that, it's kind of like another indent. Yeah, so good question. So it's really like a visual representation of an outline. Did you draw the pic at the bottom? Oh yes, this one down here. Yeah, this one's like skin. Yeah, I drew that one, but I traced it though. I traced over a Google image, but yeah, I drew that one. I drew the middle one too. Yeah. All right, so those are just some examples. And then so the next thing you could do, right? So after you recreate your notes or you're reviewing your notes, another important part is active recalling or quizzing yourself, right? And so here are like some ways that you can do to quiz yourself. And I know a lot of you talked about this already, but any practice questions that are given to you are a good practice to quiz yourself. There's also sample exams, right? So if they give you like a sample midterm, like I treat that like it's the Bible, right? Because it's the same professor that made the sample test that made the actual test. So it's gonna be really, really similar. And then I think Chris and Albert also mentioned explaining it to a friend or yourself and out loud is the best, right? Because like something that I noticed as once I became an SI leader was that once I got better at explaining things, like I got better at understanding things. And so that was like a really big game changer for me. And so these three here are like my personal favorites for quizzing myself and making sure I know it. Because if you know it, then you can explain it. But if you can't explain it, then you don't know it as well. And another thing is using flashcards. So if you feel like you have a hard time memorizing like little things like that, then flashcards are pretty good, like Quizlet. And what's important though is you should write them like as questions. So instead of just writing like one word and then some description on the back, you could be like, what is X? Instead of just writing like X, if that makes sense. And so the benefit of this is that quizzing leads to better retention. All right. And so this brings me to the next point is that more effort is what leads to better retention. So I think a lot of people kind of stray away from testing themselves and quizzing themselves and trying to explain things because they think it's scary, right? Because there's that fear of getting it wrong. But it's really like, if it takes you more effort to learn the information, then it'll be like actually deeper in your brain because you've thought about it so much. And when you get it wrong, there's actually like a study that, or like an effect, like if you get it wrong, it's called like hypercorrection effect. If you get something wrong, you're more likely to get it right in the future. So when you have more effort, then that'll lead to better retention. Yeah, quizzing really is OP. Yeah, I'm glad some of y'all use it. And then so I just want to like ask y'all a question here. So like this also comes out to something called the spacing effect. So just looking at this here, just looking at this scenario, who do you think will do better on the exam? You got Gary on the top and you got Ash at the bottom. Who do you think will do better on the exam? I guess I kind of forgot to hide these thingies, but I think it's kind of self-explanatory, right? Yeah, I completely forgot I had to hide these text things, but right, the idea is that spacing is just like the words that's just like the word suggests, is you're spacing out your studying day by day instead of sticking it all into one day and then you have the last 6 days to forget about it. Right. So even though Gary studied it really early, right, he studied everything before Ash did, but he's probably going to forget all the info because he studied it so long ago. Right. But if you're spacing it like day by day, you're thinking about it every day. And when you're thinking about it every day, then it'll help you in your long-term memory for things like midterms or finals. Yeah. Asheville will never be Professor Oak's grandson. Yeah, I didn't really watch Pokemon, so I guess I don't get the reference, but I know who Ash is. Ash Ketchup. Pokemon's my favorite anime. Hot take. Yeah. but yeah, that's just to kind of show you like the how you should space out your studying. So instead of cramming it all in one day, you should kind of space it out more because it'll help you. All right. So just a quick recap of what we talked about. First, we talked about how mindset and reflection are important in improving from quarter to quarter, right? Like what could you have done differently? And remember, we asked, what's the smallest first step you can make right now to make a change in your, in your academic quarter? So think about that. We also talked about note-taking strategies. And there are things like annotating slides, and you could either do that on iPad or paper. You could outline, and then just some general tips are that you shouldn't copy the slides, especially if you're given them already, and leave empty space so that you can update it later. And then also write that handwriting is best. And then lastly, we talked about study strategies, and the important points were that you should actively review your notes, not just rereading it, because that's passive. And you should also be testing yourself, right? Like by explaining to your friends, explaining to people in your Discord, doing practice questions, doing flashcards, anything like that will help you encode it better for long-term memory. And then you should also space out your studying so that you're not like studying all in one day, you have a week to forget about it, and then it comes up and you're just like, I don't know what I just did. So yeah, space out the studying. So before we end it, does anyone have any questions? And so usually this is where a lot of people ask questions. So feel free to raise your hand using like the reaction button, or feel free to type it in the chat. Yeah, go for it, Lei.
So I have like really bad performance and like test anxiety. How do you suggest like easing that so like I don't psych myself out on the test?
Yeah, I think that's really common. I usually don't experience test anxiety. I guess I did it once when it was like a really important test. But I think the reason why I don't get it as much is because a lot of my studying is spent practicing it and doing things like practice questions or homework questions or practice exams. So you get like a feel for, like you feel what it's like to be wrong, right? And like there's no stakes on it, but you get to simulate what the test is like so that you get to see your mistakes, review it, and then when the real test comes, you're more confident because you know you reviewed what you've done wrong. So I think just practicing it and putting yourself in that position multiple times will help get you adapted to it, I think. Yeah, go for it, Sib.
Yeah, so I actually struggle with anxiety. So I understand that feeling. So I used to basically do competitive testing, LOL, in high school. And what we would do is like, it was for decathlon. So we would study like how Ash Ketchum did it, like every day before. But then the day before the test, like we took a break and like just like for your mental health, and we didn't study because you put in the work already. So then that could be the day before, or it could be the test day as well. And then just like really giving yourself the time and the mental space to like tell yourself you got it and to relax, that can help sometimes.
Yeah, and so I think Vince asked me, yeah, so the one test that I actually did have, I was really anxious about was the MCAT. So I don't know if y'all don't know what the MCAT is. It's like the one test that you take to it's kind of like the SAT but for medical school. And so it's like a really important test. So it's a really important score. And I just remember the week leading up to it, I was just like super anxious because it's like the test where you study for like months and months. Like I studied for like 4 months, I think. And then it came the night before the test. And I did what Sib said is the instinct is like, oh, I got to keep studying until the last minute until I get to the testing center. But a lot of the advice I got was to just like take it easy and just relax on that last day and really just do something to take your mind off of the stress. So like I literally watched like Karate Kid or something, like a comedy or like a family type of movie, but like It was just something to take my mind off of it, but it was still in my head. But that's just one thing I did to kind of like relax myself. Yeah, no worries, no worries. Yeah, I also got a question from Chris and Albert. How much studying do you average in a week for a class? Ooh, that's a good question. Let me think what I did this week. So I have a class that's on Mondays and Wednesdays. And so outside of class, I was making let me go back to it actually. So for this class here on the left, that was made probably in, let's see, it was like 3-ish hours of lecture. So after each lecture, then I'd probably spend like an hour and a half, probably like an equal amount of time as the lecture, putting it into a mind map. And that's just like the way I study. I know like people will be flashcarding it, that might be faster, but I would say probably about a little bit over the amount of hours of lecture there are. Yeah, no worries, Sib. Yeah, but it was probably like a little bit over the amount of hours that you spend in lecture. Yeah, no worries. And like I think something that a lot of people focus on, like I watch like study YouTube videos all the time. It's kind of sad, but a lot of people, there's a lot of YouTubers out there that are like, oh, like how I study like 10 hours a day as like a medical student. And I think that it's not really about the quantity. It's really about the quality of how you're studying, because if you're studying well, if you're doing it effectively, it shouldn't have to take you that long. Sometimes it does, but the goal shouldn't always to be like, oh, I have to study for 2 hours for each 1 hour of lecture that I have. It should be like, I should study until I feel good about it. And however long that takes you, it will be different on the person. But yeah, I wouldn't set like a number goal, like, okay, I have to study this long. But you can like keep track of how long you're doing it in case like maybe it's taking you too long so that you don't fall behind or anything like that. But yeah, good question. Any other questions? Feel free to shoot them in the chat or raise your hand. Would you be willing to give personal help on note taking for a certain class? Yeah. I mean, I'm open to it. Like I've helped a lot of people in the past. When I teach right now in SI, like right now I'm teaching physics, and so I give them tips for how to do well in their class. So if anyone wants to reach out to me like through text or email or anything like that, I'll be more than happy to help you find like the right note taking method and study strategy for a certain class. Yeah, no worries. Oh yeah, the science heavy psych course. Yeah. Yep. All right. Any other questions? Anything at all? Don't be shy. Feel free to private message as well. Any other questions on study strategies, how to get better grades? All right. So before we end, I just want to like leave y'all with one last thing, right? If you had a tough quarter, like last quarter, if you had a tough quarter, that doesn't mean you're a bad student or that you're not a hard worker, right? I think it's important to not let our grades define us, because they reflect, what happened in the past, but they don't really reflect what you're capable of doing in the future. Because there's always going to be a way for you to learn from that past quarter and learn from your experiences, and so that you can improve moving forward. So don't let like that one D or that one F in a previous quarter kind of scare you in the future. Just really look at that and look into yourself to see that what you could do better next time. Yeah. All right, but that's it for me. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. If you have any questions, like I said before, you can message me on Instagram. My Instagram is right there, and you could email me as well. This recording and these slides will be posted on our website at down here, ucr.katipunan.pso.org. That'll all be there on the website in case you want to look back at the slides again, or if you didn't catch anything. But yeah, and there's also our previous Kati courses there, and recordings on the website. So things like time management, how to stay focused, resume building, all that stuff. We did Kati courses on that, so all the slides are there. But yeah, that's it for me. Thanks again, everyone, for coming. And if anyone has any announcements, feel free to raise your hand or unmute. No problem, everyone.
Thank you.
Woo! No problem, everyone. Have a nice 3-day weekend. If you have any questions, feel free to stick around, but have a nice 3-day weekend if you're heading out. Stay safe out there. All right, what's up, guys? See you, Auding. See you, Auding. Love you. It's the bros. The bros in one frame. All right, see you. I'll be going there soon. What's up?
We want to know, how are you so attractive? We DM'd you, but you didn't respond.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have an answer for that. You know, sometimes people are just born differently. They're just built differently. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just natural. I'm a natty.